the tradition of custodianship and law of the country on which the University of Sydney campuses stand. And this is the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to those who have cared and continue to care for the country. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the business school at Sydney Uni. This is our beautiful building, except I don't work in that building. I work in the more modern business school. We've got 10, just to give you a bit of context, our business school has 10 different disciplines within the school, around 500 staff, and depending on the year, between 12 and 14,000 students, with a very high proportion of international students. And what I'm going to tell you about is a little bit about our project, which is called Connected Learning at Scale. It is part of a wider ecosystem of projects, but the ultimate goal of all of these projects is really about transformation and about helping students or enabling students to be more connected. Because when they're part of these huge, large cohorts, they do tell us that they don't feel like they belong. They can go through their whole university experience without feeling any connection. And it's not just connection to the teacher, say, it's also connection to each other and connection to the community and to the discipline. So our project, I'm going to rush through very quickly, but it's kind of underpinned by 3 principles where they're pretty simple. It's about students connecting with information and their discipline knowledge. It's about students connecting with each other through being active in the classroom. And it's also about connecting through relevant and authentic assessment and getting the feedback. And all of this is built around an umbrella of being able to develop graduates who can solve or be part of an international, global, local challenges. And our class project uses co-design, and there's just a list there of some of our other projects that you can Google and find out more about. But this project that I'm going to talk about is really about our credit units, or subjects you might call them, and how we've gone around about designing them with our students. So I'm the academic director of the business co-design team. We're about 25 members, and we've got some media producers, learning designers, educational developers, research and evaluation staff, and a learning technologist. And we work with our stakeholders who you can see listed there on the bottom. Obviously, our students are our main co-design partners, but also working closely with our teaching staff and industry partners. So when I put this paper in, Anne-Marie and Anne asked me to talk a little bit more or explain what it was that this program was. So it's called the Master of Commerce, and we do have about between 18,000 and 2,500 students enroll every semester. And so all of those students will do the 2 core units in our master's program. And then after they've done their core, they then select a specialization. So we've got 7 specializations. So for example, if they choose accounting, they'll do the foundation, they'll do a whole number of elective subjects, and then they'll do the capstone. And so in terms of large classes, we get these huge classes in the core, and some of our specializations such as data analytics, finance, they get also a really high number of students. So they all have to do the foundation subject and the capstone. So there could be over 1,000 students in those units as well. So we've been redesigning these units, these large units, and we take an approach, a sort of iterative approach. Apologies if this is a little bit small to read, but it's really just about the stages, so the phases. So we start off in the picture there, we've got where we do some ideation and brainstorming and thinking about what could this unit, what could this subject look like, what's the ideal, and then we break it down and we start to scope out some of the changes and things that we can implement. We go through the design, develop, implementation stages, and then we evaluate each cycle. And we work with each unit over 3 semesters. So we're working together as a co-design team, if you like, for about 18 months. Each semester runs, approximately 6 months. So we do evaluate our units, and we do have ethics approval to collect data from students through surveys and focus groups, also from staff and tutor focus groups, and we collect learning management data, and we've started doing classroom observations to look how we're using space in these big classrooms. I don't have enough time to go into all of the findings that we've come across so far. So we're about 2.5 years into it. It's a 5-year project. And I've just put on the screen some of the comments, some of the good comments from students about what they're enjoying about some of the changes that we've been implementing. But what I've written about in the paper, you can definitely read much more detail about, because don't have a lot of time, but just a few of the themes that have come out from across the 25 units that we've been working with so far. And so in terms of student engagement in these large classes, these were 3 of the top themes that came out. So in terms of value, it's what students really value. And we found that they really do make a judgment about the value of the content and the activities that we give them, based on whether they're being assessed, of course, but also about whether they're being discussed in tutorials. And they find that if they realize that they're not being discussed, or they're not being asked about the content that they've been presented with, then they obviously they stop engaging with those materials. They do tend to put in effort in the early weeks, and then if they're not really, if they notice the tutors are not picking up on the information and they're not being asked to contribute, then their interest wanes and they sort of disconnect. They do value authentic assessment and the ability to sort of apply their understanding, and this, they really are interested in connecting to their discipline and understanding what it is to be an accountant, for example. In terms of accountability, this was obviously prominent when discussing sort of group work tasks, and both in assessments and in class activities. Students felt particularly demotivated when their peers don't participate. So they're asking to make their peers more accountable. Some students are suggesting participation marks, which we try and avoid. Our international students don't. They feel like it disadvantages them. But there's a whole discussion around cameras on, cameras off in the online modes, and at least trying to make students accountable in small breakout rooms to give this sort of small classroom feel. And tone also was important in these big classes. Students make a judgment early on about the tone, because they don't always see their unit coordinator or their lecturers, because now we're delivering content online or recorded lectures. So they're really that first video that sets the tone for the unit. And they really want us to clarify expectations, whether it's informal sort of sharing ideas and brainstorming, or whether they need to be more formal in the way they communicate, referencing, for example. One of the other themes that we have written about in the paper is about how they interact with technology. And particularly they like online whiteboards. They like to be able to use these tools to capture their ideas. They find them helpful to revise. Some students were a little bit frustrated about the tools like Padlet, for example. They found the lack of structure hard to get their head around. Students told us that they really love polls, and even when they're time poor, they will still engage with a poll, because it helps them understand where they sit within the class, and they're easier to use. In terms of online discussions, they told us because of these huge cohorts, they don't always post their answers and things on discussions because it's already been said. And they said they wanted more opportunities to like other people's posts, and because then they're not being repetitive. And then just lastly, the other theme that we've written a little bit about is how their interacting with content through technology. Obviously, we're all starting to use more and more video in our presentations, and students really like them, but they tell us very clearly no more than 10 minutes, or they're not going to engage, they're going to turn it off. They want key points and takeaway messages, so that helps them to revise. We integrate a lot of reflective prompts into our videos. Students said that they tend to do them at first, but then because they're not getting any feedback from these reflective prompts, they tend to wane off, although they said they do reflect internally, but we should use them, not to overuse them. And in terms of course readings, again, they said unless they could see a clear alignment with an exam, for example, then they very rarely engage with course readings. And so they wanted us to be much clearer about the purpose of readings. Okay, so that was a very, very quick overview of some of the findings, but you can read more in the paper. Just last thing I wanted to tell you about was our design patterns. So obviously it's a big project and we want what we found to be useful to other people. So we've been working, we've been developing class patterns based on the work of Peter Goodyear and Takeshi Iba, trying to like a pattern or a sort of, they look a little bit like this. We've started to publish them on our blog, so you can read more about them, but it's really about picking up some of those ideas, some of those problems, coming up with some solutions a little bit, the way Jackie organized her presentation earlier. We've been doing these in terms of patterns. So thinking about the kinds of things or problems that we encounter in large classes, and then providing some solutions and also some examples in some of our units where that's happened. And so finally, I'd just like to thank all of our co-design partners. There are many of them, especially our teaching academics and teaching teams and students. I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't go too far over 10 minutes.